bit of his journey, how he got to the point where he is, some failures, some wins he went through, and then we're also going to dive into some Amazon suspensions. A lot of people go through suspensions in Q4 when it's the most important to not be suspended and where you get the most sales. Unfortunately, Amazon loves to suspend during that point of time. So it's really important to go through that hurdle as fast as possible so you don't miss out as many sales as possible. So yeah, Chris, thank you so much for coming on. I'd love to hear more about you and how you got started in all this.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And it's not maybe so much that they love to suspend in Q4 more than other times of the year. It's just that they don't take it seriously on a different level during Q4 the way they should, because some people are doubling, what their normal monthly sales are in Q4. And Amazon might not appreciate that. They just kind of go about their business and suspend or take listings down or fail to answer appeals or messages that you send to them. My journey started way back in the 2000s, mid 2000s at Amazon. I worked on the seller side of the business for, I guess, 5.5 years. Worked a bit before that in the A to Z guarantee claims teams, but that was kind of a short period of a matter of months. But I spent several years on the so-called seller performance teams, investigating accounts, kind of a one-to-one relationship with the current consulting we do I've been consulting for 7 years since leaving Amazon. But the main things were performance evaluation, right? Should the seller be on the platform? Should that listing be up and available for people to buy? Is this a good seller, bad seller? Those kinds of judgments, and reading their appeals if their account or their listing had been suspended. That's how this all started.
Cool. What do you enjoy the most? Like, did you enjoy the consulting side? Amazon's toxic. I doubt you enjoyed working at Amazon. I'd be surprised. What part did you enjoy the most, and why? Is it because of the consulting, people listening, the strategy? Like, what? Can you go into that?
I love the strategy. Yeah, I love taking an analytical approach to the appeals process, because a lot of people, either sellers appealing themselves or other companies that operate in the space, sometimes don't take that analytical strategy or approach, and they just wing it, or they just throw everything at the wall to see what sticks. We think for a suspended account or a top-selling ASIN that gets suspended on Amazon, you can't afford to drag the process out. You can't afford to risk never getting reinstated. So I do enjoy that. I enjoy the strategy. And I did enjoy the seller performance team work that I was doing, investigative work. I would say from the beginning, the first year was kind of crazy, learning all this stuff. Year 2, year 3 were probably my most enjoyable at Amazon. I think once I got to year 4 into year 5, I was already thinking about how sellers could be assisted by somebody with my background and knowledge, but from outside the company. And I was reaching that kind of, maybe around year 4, a lot of people who work at Amazon start thinking about something else that they want to do. And maybe getting a little burned out or a little just disenchanted with what they see going on around them. That said, I think things were being handled a bit better internally back then when I was there. Now it just seems like they're automating as much as possible. They're watering down the message as much as possible. They're justifying the suspensions as little as possible. I think this is a very different world in today's time. So
yeah, I don't know if you've ever heard of the app Blind. It's like LinkedIn, but you don't have profile names, essentially. So everyone's anonymous. And it's so funny seeing the people at Amazon. They go like, this work environment is crazy toxic. And that's what I get 99% of the time in Amazon. And they just talk honestly. Since everyone's anonymous, they just talk honestly, like, hey, Google's awesome. Amazon sucks. Like, there's other, and it's really interesting how on LinkedIn, everyone's so professional and everything's so like normalized. But you take the same person, but you take out their name, they'll just like start, like, they're not afraid to put curse words in there. Like, it's unloading. Like when you don't have a name attached, it's like they're a lot more relaxed and be able to put like honest things. And it's really interesting to see these people and just talk about like what they went through, like where work environment stuff. It's just really fascinating.
I can probably explain the mentality. I mean, some people work at Amazon for a short time. They hate it right away. They don't like the environment. They don't like the workaholic culture. They have maybe professional beef with how things are done, a personal beef with how things are done. They don't last more than a year. A lot of people drop off after a year, maybe 2 years if they really leg it out. I was one of those people that was gung-ho, and the more of that work I did, the more attracted I was to it, like a moth to a flame style. And I was more like the longer term kind of wear and tear, you know, grinding down as you get to year 4, year 5, simply because I think what Amazon's perspective, the short version to explain it would be, if they identify you as a really good earner, like you're really productive, you're really reliable, instead of like rewarding that, they say, oh, this is somebody we can ride all the way until they've run out of their utility and they're not useful anymore. And then water will find its level, and they'll either leave or we'll find something else for them to do. So it's kind of like they're identifying which cows to milk. And if you're not the cow that can be milked, then that's the person who goes to the hamburger farm. If you're the cow that can be milked, you milk and milk and milk and milk until there's no milk left. And then that person on their own, which is what I did, I chose to leave, that person departs. But either way, Amazon gets out of that employee what they need. So.
Yeah. And it's really unfortunate that that is the culture. And has a lot to do with most corporate cultures just in general, which is really unfortunate, because at the end of the day, like, you can take the same person, and then if you put a manager above them that like genuinely cares about how, like, who they are, that same person is going to put out double, triple the output most of the time by just caring, saying like, hey, is there anything I can do for you? Hey, what else it may be. And having that extra layer of comfort makes it where the output is so much better. And I don't think these corporate environments, they think the fear factor is stronger, like saying, oh, you're going to get fired if you don't do this fast enough. When you do that, you are working, it's not productive. Yes, you'll get what you want short term, but long term, that employee is going to leave within a year, like exactly what you said. But if you have comfort saying, hey, is there anything I can do to help? Or is there anything else I can do to push this along? They're going to work 3 times as hard, and it's going to be more productive long term. But that's not the mindset.
It's how they do performance. They're measuring. I mean, management is measuring management on metrics. So the idea is everyone has to squeeze the maximum yield of productivity out of anyone who reports directly to them. Like if you're a manager, or if you're a VP, or even a senior VP, all of your direct reports have to, like, in order for you to secure your own future with Amazon, or your own positive performance review, or your own employment, sometimes you have to push everyone beneath you to give as much as they possibly can, even if sometimes that's irrational or unreasonable. And if those people aren't producers or top performers, then you have the incentive to get them out of your ecosystem, because they're failing to support you and your endeavors in employment so that you can move up the food chain.
Which is definitely unfortunate. Curious. So a lot of people, when they go through their journey of working, they really see, okay, like, these are the weaknesses, these are my strengths. For example, my weaknesses is writing, anything like with graphic design, like those are my weaknesses. I cannot communicate via text. Like if you were to try to get me to write an email longer than 2 sentences, it's going to look like a 6th grader wrote it. But when it comes to actually communicating via words and via video, that is my communication style. So that's something I had to learn through my journey. Is there any weaknesses or strengths that you really saw and discovered in yourself when going through this journey?
One of the initial shortcomings that I had to kind of overcome was this idea that Amazon had it in their interest to improve some of these broken processes or faulty SOPs, standard operating procedures. Maybe I was initially too rosy about things because I remembered how my team was when I was there. And I remember a high competency level among coworkers and colleagues that I remembered. But I didn't understand right away that things had changed negatively kind of across the board since I had left the company, because I took a year off after I left Amazon, backpacking, traveling, went to Asia, went to Australia, New Zealand, places like that. when I jumped back into it, in my brain, I was still, I mean, all of us have this kind of subjectivity bias, right? Like you remember how it was when you were there, and it might've been 18 months earlier, but over those 18 months, a lot of people had left. A lot of the competency was gone. A lot of the reviewing and auditing of work performance, in terms of objectively who was performing well and making good business decisions and who was not. A lot of that had fallen by the wayside because everyone's just go, go, go at Amazon. Get it done, get it done, get it done, right? Imagine that you're trying to hire a bunch of people to paint, like a crew to paint your house. Well, are they going to do a great job if you give them 5 days to paint your whole house? Or if you say, well, I want you to do the 5-day quality work, but I want you to do it in 36 hours or in like a day and a half. Are you going to get a wonderfully painted house that's beautiful, or did you really need the 5 days for that? It's sort of the same thing here. A lot of Amazon is just go, 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 get it done. And I kind of underestimated that when I started consulting because I thought they would see, oh, they're making work for themselves. Oh, they're making life difficult for themselves. Even just appealing to their own selfish interests, like for their own selfish reasons, will they fix A and B and C because those are broken and not working properly? Years later, we're seeing, no, the truth is Amazon's only too happy to make life more difficult for themselves or to make more work, for themselves and to be inefficient. Again, we're not talking about inefficiency dealing with sellers necessarily. I just mean dealing with each other.
Yeah. And what's crazy is on my LinkedIn post, I do this monthly newsletter of the latest Amazon news. And I was looking at the analytics, and LinkedIn will tell you the companies that look at your thing. I had over 500 Amazon employees look at my post for the latest news. And I was like, what is going on? Why are so many people at Amazon looking at my post? And when I realized, I communicated that, then I realized someone told me, everyone within Amazon has so many NDAs that they can't communicate within each other. They have to go to external sources like me to understand what is happening within their own company. And I was like, what? Are you serious?
Not uncommon.
They're relying on me for the latest news within their own company. It's just like, what?
Oh, that's
crazy.
That's part of my weekly existence, whether I'm talking to account managers about what the performance teams are doing, investigations. Often I'm kind of the person telling somebody who works at Amazon, this is what's happening out there in the world. This is how this is playing out. The mistakes, the gaps, the misses inside aren't being, first of all, sometimes they're just not aware of it. Secondly, they're aware of it. They don't know what to do about it. Thirdly, they're aware of it. They don't know what to do about it, but they don't even know who's working on who the problem belongs to, or who's going to fix the problem, who's working on the problem at a high level within the company. Those three things are missing. But for us, we've got the point of view and the perspective. We have a view of the field, and we can kind of tell somebody who's, on their own 2-yard line what's going on the 2-yard line on the other side of the field, which is important.
Yeah, that's amazing. So question for you. So you kind of went through some of your strengths within there. I don't know if you specified it or I just missed it. Are there any weaknesses in there that you said, hey, like this is where you could work on, or any like successful problem or solution that you had that saying, oh, I learned that this was my weakness, this was a problem, and this is how I overcame it. Was there anything like that?
Well, what I was saying a moment ago was my inability, like I had underestimated the seriousness with which VPs and senior VPs at Amazon would understand when something was going wrong, broken, hadn't been fixed, and was making more work for their own people and for themselves.
Got it.
So if those people were reading an escalation email, appeal for reinstatement of a listing or an account, they weren't readily identifying how they got there. How did this person end up having to reach out to a senior VP instead of going through proper protocols and channels? So I was expecting management level employees or VPs to, for their own reasons, understand, oh, this is going to happen to me every single day of my life at this company, unless I jump in, find the problem at the source, tie it off there, stop the bleeding, and then future emails like this expressing all these mistaken handoffs and mistransferred contacts and disasters won't come to me. I expected them from a strategic perspective for their own reasons to want to keep as much of that away from their door. So that was kind of a failure of perception on my part. Of course, over the years, we've gotten better at keeping an open mind in terms of this could cut a couple of different ways. So we need to be ready for 2 or 3 outcomes here, not just one. So I wouldn't just prepare one outcome. And I try to speak with clients, sellers, before they even hire us. I try to get them into that room or that mental space of there could be a couple of potential outcomes when we try to help you with this initially, but we're ready for that. We're prepared. And obviously at this point in our business in year 7, year 8, we're ready to experience all those permutations because Amazon is just so complex, has had such trouble scaling, and has some gaps in their decision-making trees.
Yeah. I love to hear some of your situational things. I bet you've been through a lot of crazy situations that most, like, for example, the pesticide crisis. Like, remember when that automated system went through like 1,000 listings, like, or millions of listings, and if you had like an elbow pad that you said it molded to your elbow, whatever it may be, they said, oh, mold equals pesticide. Shut down listing.
Basic bots, basic.
Horrible stuff. And that happened to thousands, millions of sellers, whatever it may be. Is there other situations in there that Amazon sellers have to be aware of that are common things similar to the pesticide crisis? Whether if it's using the word, the certifications, you can't use like organic or those type of things. Is there other things that if you had a list of saying like, hey, here are the things that you have to be aware of, what kind of situations would you say there?
I've got a number one especially for Q4, control your async contributions as much as you possibly can. Just being in brand registry, just having your own trademark registered brand doesn't mean that you control all contributions on that ASIN. So make sure you're reloading your flat files as often as possible to protect against another party from illicitly adding something to your async contributions that will trigger a listing suspension. And a lot of black hat services and sellers understand this very well. They know how they can try to tuck in some back end keywords that'll get your listing taken down. The pesticide example you gave, a lot of people were tucking in the word pesticide itself or words for pesticides in an async contribution on a competitor's listing. So understand that you cannot just lock a listing from anyone making changes to it. I know that sounds crazy. I know it's a loophole Amazon should have changed and fixed eons ago. But the way it is now, and they won't accept responsibility for never having done that type of work to protect you. You're responsible for it. That burden's on your shoulders. So always make sure you're not leaving fields vacant in flat files. Always make sure you're syncing up to Amazon's API, re-uploading your flat files with your contribution so that somebody cannot overwrite yours or try to insert back-end keywords like illicit terms. I mean, we saw, people putting in words like cannabis, pesticide, things that would be like hate speech. I mean, all sorts of crazy things. Just to hospital, putting in the word hospital. I sound like I'm coming up with suggestions. I mean, these are things that the black hats already know, by the way. I'm not giving them any new, fresh ideas. The problem is Amazon's fully aware of it, and they've got no real plan to help you prevent that from happening in the first place. All they can do is kind of sort of maybe help you fix it after it's already happened, but your listing would already be down at that point, like you mentioned with the pesticides.
I was really fascinated. Do you guys, the fields? I forgot what they're called. There's a word for it. The fields that are near the variations that'll tell you more descriptions of the product. Like for example, if you buy a battery, it'll tell you like wattage, and like it'll give you like those words at the very top. I forgot those words, what they're called, but basically Amazon, if you don't fill in those fields, Amazon will generate those fields for you. They'll like take related products. Like for example, this is a skin cream, okay? And it will say like ingredients. It'll have like a little thing, and it will automatically generate from a related product, and it'll say like vitamin A. And it was like we did not tell Amazon. There's nowhere in there that said vitamin A, but it said in our ingredients we had vitamin A. So it's important to put you fill in those fields because Amazon will generate them from random things. Like if someone buys a related product, Amazon's gonna, oh, these are practically the same thing, and automatically fill in those fields and say and then start putting that out in your listing where you can actually start getting bad reviews because we see people saying, hey, there's no vitamin A in this. It's like, well, yeah, there isn't. So it's important to fill in those fields. They will get filled in for you. Yeah.
We did work with a lot of sellers who told us things like one of two things. Either, hey, they're flagging me for blank. I don't have any terms or health claims in my listing language that should be flagged, and they weren't correct. Like, we actually went into their listings and we said, well, wait, there are claims in here. And they would say like, well, but that's not really a claim, but it was. So those were like some seller mistakes that could have been prevented. Also, a lot of potential clients and sellers that contacted us had outsourced listing optimization and listing creation to like a company that would do it for them. And that company didn't understand compliance. They just knew how to pump in certain keywords, and they weren't reviewing or monitoring the work of the firm that they hired. And so they were getting flagged, didn't understand why. They got the flag messaging. They sent it to the agency that said, well, we didn't do anything wrong. And we investigated it and we found out that they did do something wrong. So you have to have some checks and balances in there. You have to have like kind of compliance eyeballs that go through this stuff, excuse me, before it goes live on the marketplace, because there are some easily preventable mistakes that are making their way into listing content. And then all of a sudden your listings are taken down. You just have to watch. You have to watch Amazon like a hawk, but you have to watch yourself like a hawk too. And if you hire out somebody to do it for you, you have to make sure they understand these concepts.
So it's easy to monitor what things are suspended when you only have like less than 100 SKUs, 100 ASINs. But what would you recommend tool-wise of monitoring if an ASIN does get suspended for those people that have 1,000+ ASINs? It's like no one's gonna scroll down under Seller Central and look at all their products and see if there's anything suspended. You might get the message, the email, if you're lucky, the Amazon will email you about the suspension. But question to you: what tools would you monitor large-scale ASINs to see if you're suspended?
Yeah, and this is a question that's come up in a couple of recent podcasts and even on our own podcast. We're still there's no silver bullet here. There's no kind of golden way of going about this. If I will definitely present to your listeners the tool once we get to the point where we're like, this is the best one. I know that's not a satisfying answer for the moment. We're looking into this too, because we do have clients that have thousands of SKUs, thousands of listings. Yeah, they're not great at picking out IP violations. There is some software, for legal that we've heard about. It's not perfect in terms of compliance in terms of avoiding Amazon's bots. Unfortunately, that's changing a lot on Amazon. Amazon isn't going to give you a list where you can just take that list and say, I have to search all my listings for these terms. First of all, it's not public, it's proprietary. And secondly, it's changing a lot. So I think service and tools providers have had some trouble finding a solution that's software-wise in terms of how to keep up with all the changing tectonic plates around what Amazon is trying to. It could be a term that's on there today is gone tomorrow, right? Yeah. And it's just something you have to stay on top of.
Yeah. Yep. I totally agree.
I know a manual fix isn't realistic for somebody who's got that many SKUs, but yeah.
True. And I feel like you can use most of the any alert tool that I know there's a lot of tools that make it where you lose buy box. So if you lose buy box, it'll alert you. I assume once you get suspended, you'll lose the buy box. So from there, you should get the notification that you lost the buy box and get that notification from there. Wouldn't that be a solution as well from these tools? Just a buy box notification tool?
Yeah, possibly. And then of course, anytime you've been suspended on a listing and you haven't been there for a week or two, you know you're not going to be the easiest to search and the easiest to find, right? That just makes sense because you've lost some sales rank. But yeah, the buy box alert that you suggested is a step in the right direction for sure.
Cool. Yeah. We actually have a question from one of our audience members. It's a very long question, so
I just read it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So sellers may correct the issue, but not look at it holistically and see other products in their catalog and potentially be flagged for the same reason. Correct. Also, if they're cleaning up their listing, they don't clean up their master data. Therefore, I'm going to read the rest. Therefore, they may be re-uploading the content that can cause the issues months later. Yes. So basically what she's saying is the catalog listing report, from what I understood in the answer, the catalog listing report, if you update it manually within Seller Central and then you upload it, your catalog listing report, it'll reset all the changes that you had. So basically make sure you have the same catalog listing report that you're always updating. So that way, when you make changes, it won't reset all the data you just worked on, essentially.
Right.
But I haven't used the catalog listing reports can be really glitchy sometimes. Is fixing errors in them is really, really difficult.
You might have to do it more than once, run it a couple times to make sure you have the right thing. Yeah, the right info.
True.
Updated info. Sometimes data hasn't matured. This is something else that was a struggle at Amazon because sometimes I'd be looking at immature data while I was in the process of investigating an account. That made it really difficult for me to decide if the account was trending in the right direction or the wrong direction, or if it was even the right time to decide to suspend or reinstate that account. Obviously, if it's trending in the right direction, you're more prone to reinstate them when they appeal. But when they submit an appeal might be a good time, depending on if the data is matured or not, or a bad time. I mean, it's, you want as much info at your disposal before you make a decision that's that important. But the tools we were using back then sometimes would get, the indicator there would say, some of this data hasn't matured yet. And I'd be like, well, maybe I should just be postponing this entire account review until the data is mature. But would I know exactly when that was going to be? Possibly not.
Yeah. So going back to your list of the main reasons why people do get suspended. So you said having the random words inside there, like certifications, claims, obviously the pesticide stuff. Is there anything else? I know the main image banners that used to be really popular. Like having text in your main image, that used to be like huge. Like everyone would do it, saying like, "Hey, buy now" or whatever it may be, or like peanut butter bars,
free warranty.
yeah, exactly. That was normal, and it worked really well. And Amazon came out with one update. I forgot what day it was, but one random update, and it just wiped out like all the people that used it.
I remember that day. Yeah.
It was a big day. It was a big
thousands of emails at once. That was fun. Yeah, I do.
Yes. I bet your job it's like every time Amazon updates something, you just all of a sudden get like 20 calls like on one day.
They drop the bomb. Yeah. Whenever they drop a bomb on certain kinds of sellers, they take out large swaths or large chunks of those seller populations. True. So we hear from everyone the same day, the same week at least. Hey, I lost my account because of blank. Suspensions are trendy, sometimes cyclical. We've seen pretty much every trend and cycle that there's been, but there could always be a new one. And then a lot of sellers don't react well. I mean, you and I have kind of talked privately about this too. What are the mistakes sellers make when they're appealing? Some of them fundamentally don't understand what's happening to them enough to appeal on their own. They need help understanding what's going on, but they also need help understanding what Amazon expects in the appeal. Other mistakes are sometimes people aren't good writers. I mean, I know this sounds like a basic point, but people will send me their plan of action and ask me to review it before they send it to Amazon. Sometimes I don't know what they're talking about reading that document. And that could mean, maybe their boss wrote it because it's so important that the biggest, manager in the company who's been there the longest has to write it. But you know what? Sometimes that person has the least writing skill, right? and they communicate their ideas top down by delegating things to other people, but that means some of their skills are soft in terms of written communication because they haven't done it that much in the last couple of years. That's a real thing. That's not just, you know,
and
like
and you have to speak Amazon as well. Like it's a really another language. You have to really speak Amazon, saying like, hey, this is what we're doing, this is what's going on, this is what happened, it was a mistake here, this at this particular point in time, here's how we fixed it, this is what we are executing next. In the future, we hope to like bring more sales, whatever it may be. And like, you need to speak that Amazon language in a way. And if you're not deep in the weeds of Amazon, you can't speak the language.
Their jargon. They prize their jargon. Yeah. Sometimes they use their jargon in outbound messages to sellers, which no seller, unless they read a post by somebody about it who worked at Amazon, I guess, or found out some other way, no seller knows what that phrase means to an Amazonian. So it's weird to see that in outbound messaging, but also you can communicate faster and more easily with somebody in seller performance if you speak their language by using some of their jargon. I wouldn't say keyword stuff it and throw all these terms into a document for an appeal and just hope that this sort of shotgun blast of terminology will get you through it. No, it doesn't work like that. But if they're having trouble grasping what you're trying to communicate because you're using wording that comes from elsewhere in business that's not Amazon centric, they might just reject you because they're like, I think I understand what this person's saying, but I'm not sure. And until we're sure, we can't risk reinstating them as an active seller.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Is there any?
Oh, and one other tip. I just thought of something. A lot of people call account health reps like when they first get suspended or when they find out that they're about to be suspended, or if they've had an appeal rejected and they want to know why it's rejected, they call the account health services team, AHS for short. We have seen a lot of sellers, whatever they're told on that call, we're not talking about seller support. They talk to account health reps. Whatever they're told on that call, they accept it as the gospel, as 100% accurate. They're not factoring in for maybe that rep is guessing. Maybe there's some conjecture. Maybe they're comparing you to their last call, and that's an apples and oranges comparison. So there's a huge abundance of trust, and I want you to trust some of what they tell you if you can verify it elsewhere, if you can verify it on a subsequent call, or if you can confirm with the facts and the data at your disposal that what they're talking about makes sense. Don't assume just because you get some random word of advice that that person's an expert just because they work at the company. Everything account health reps tell you, take with a grain of salt, verify it somewhere else, because I can't tell you how many times we've had conversations with sellers appealing it who say, I just called, I know exactly why I was suspended, I know exactly why my appeal was rejected, I know exactly this, this, and this. The person sounded very confident that they were very sure of themselves. What's the first thing I say? Call back. Talk to somebody else and see if that exact statement comes to you from the second person. How many times does the second person say something 180 degrees different, totally different from what the first person told you? Happens every day. Happens every day.
Yeah, and it's unfortunately it's true. I made a LinkedIn post making fun of this, but basically the Amazon account reps that are managing your advertising, they basically if you're ever having bad ACOS, like their solution for everything that's related to advertising, their goal is just to say spend more. Like that's all you have to do, spend more, and it will solve itself.
Shocking.
It's so funny because it's just like it makes no sense, but their entire goal is just to get you to spend more. So if any problem arises, it's the solution, always spend more, and it will solve all your problems. And it's just like, oh my gosh, this is so bad.
And they have time to talk to you on the phone. I'm not saying that they don't look at your appeal themselves. Consider that they might give you an opinion or suggestions based on their own ideas about why an appeal needs to be rewritten. They're not always giving you advice or suggestions that's based on why you were just rejected. They might not know why you were rejected. They might not be able to find information about why your last appeal was rejected. But logic would dictate that if you're going to revise an appeal, and make improvements or tweaks or changes to that appeal, you should probably know why the last one wasn't acceptable in the first place, right? Mm-hmm. So if no one, whether it's you or the account health rep or anyone else that you know at Amazon, if no one, let's say an account manager, if no one can explain to you what you're revising and why, based on that rejection, then they're really just giving you an opinion, and you shouldn't waste valuable time on guesses and opinions. You should be just going with fact at that point.
Yeah. It really comes down to, like, you would think the account managers would have some type of knowledge that most other third parties like us wouldn't know, but it's actually the opposite. We know a lot what's happening within Amazon that they don't know. And if you use common sense, you'd be like, duh. You would think that we wouldn't know anything compared to what's happening within Amazon, but it's their incompetence that makes us where we are in business.
I mean, in fairness, in their defense, they're shielded from a lot of useful bits of information because Amazon isn't sure how much to trust their own account managers with different types of sensitive or delicate information, whether it's about a competitor of yours that might be attacking you and getting your listings taken down. They're trying to keep the account manager focused on you, not anyone who might be in your category, in your space, attacking you. But also, as we've all heard, there's been situations where account managers were doing things they weren't, looking at things they weren't supposed to, sharing info they weren't supposed to for a variety of reasons, and they were either not following their own parameters, or they were maliciously doing things they weren't supposed to because they were financially incentivized. We've all heard about situations like that where employees had to be terminated for accepting financial compensation for extra info that they weren't supposed to share. So that keeps these teams siloed even more than they were before, unfortunately.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to make sure that you communicate to the audience, that either what's happening in Q4, how to prepare, or is there anything else that you wanted to make sure we talked about today?
Yeah, and it's interesting. We were having discussions. I'm in New York right now in the payability offices. We have a meetup that we do here. We were talking about this a lot last night. In Q4, you can't afford to just open up a case with seller support and wait and hope for the best. Too much money is being lost. There's a bunch of reasons. Obviously, you can't have your top selling ASIN suspended for too long because you're losing more money than you are the rest of the year for most of our clients, at least. It's also, consider the volume of appeals that Amazon's getting in Q4. It's going to be higher, right? Mm-hmm. People are more desperate. People are submitting more appeals. People who are ignored will come back writing to Jeff, trying to write to executive seller relations, trying to go through brand registry, trying to bug their account manager more. Like, everything is at a heightened level, and you have to struggle to be heard anyway. In typical Amazon times in Q4, you might really struggle to be heard. It might take them way longer to read and answer you in Q4. What does that mean? You have to get it right either the first time or in the first couple of tries. So don't appeal hastily. Don't wing it. Don't guess. Don't read a bunch of random seller forum posts and assume that it's the exact same situation as yours without some analytical reasoning behind it. I mean, if it is the exact same situation, and whoever posted that has appealed it the same number of times, and they wrote the same types of appeals, and they sent them to the same exact places, and 4, 5, 6 different factors line up and coincide, then fine. Maybe then start comparing yourself to somebody else. Otherwise, assume it's an apples and oranges comparison and only go with specific data and factual info at your disposal. And don't, I guess that's part one. Part two is don't sit there waiting. If you don't hear from them, you call account health and they say, well, it's still being reviewed, you're going to have to wait longer. Don't do that. They're telling you that because it's in their interest to tell you that. It's not in your interest to wait and have your listings or even your full account suspended during the busiest time of the year when you could be making the most sales. They have queues, they have metrics, they have to keep things moving. That doesn't help you, that helps them if they keep everyone moving by stalling them or making excuses or saying, hey, they just need a little bit more time to review it. They might just be making that up. There may not be a second review coming. You might have already gotten your answer. Or if they're just going to keep saying they're reviewing, it doesn't mean that the second review is going to be better than the first one or the third is going to be better than the second one. You have to find escalation paths, and you have to push it up the ladder to make sure somebody with, seasoned veteran experience is getting a look at that appeal.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. Chris, can you please tell them how to find you, your website, and everything else like that?
Yeah. So, and the podcast I referenced earlier, Seller Performance Solutions, we do there's a lot of free content that we offer on my blog, which is ecommerceChris.com. We have a contact form there if you want to send us specifics about your case, your problem, something you need us to help you troubleshoot. And then the podcast, lots of free content there. We're usually pretty direct and straightforward in our communication in terms of, free advice, free ideas about how to get unstuck when you're being ignored by Amazon. That's the Seller Performance Solutions podcast. So
cool. That's awesome.
And obviously, if you know Victor, that means you know me. You can reach out to him, and he can pass stuff along to us, and we'll take a look at it for you and get you. Time is of the essence in Q4, so you have to be pointed in the right direction pretty quickly.
Cool. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much for joining, and thank you everyone for listening. Thanks, guys.